Hi guys, this is Gundam Mechanic again, coming with you with the first part of the basic series of building and painting Gundams. But first comes first, which is building the Gundam. So, what I'm going to teach today is basic nub removal and sanding. It's really not that complicated as most people make it out to be. And we're going to be working on this kit. So the first things first is to be cutting off of the runners. Now, the best way to cut off of a runner is you want to take normally like your kind of, I guess in a sense, these aren't crappy nippers by any means. These are the God hands. I think these were like the $25 ones. So they're really good. They just dulled over time for me, so I got the Tamiya. I believe these are the $35 ones. These are great. I really like these. So what I do is I have two pairs of nippers. You don't have to do this if you have one pair of nippers. You just use the same to cut it off and then bring down the nub mark, which I will show you how to do. It's really not necessary to do this, but I mean, I just do it out of habit. So I'm going to be cutting the first part. I want the nippers facing away from the part, and I'm clipping it just off like that. Alright, so then we're left with all of this excess stuff right here. All this excess nub marks. It will focus. Come in. There we go. Alright, we have all this excess nub mark, which is a-okay, because all we're going to do is we're going to take this and get as close as we can and just snip it off. And we do that repeatedly. See? It leaves it nice and clean. And we'll do that with the last bit. And see how it kind of made a little bit of a mark on that one? If it will, come on. If it will focus for me. There we go. It made a little bit of a mark, so that's okay. That's where people either use sanding sponges like these. I use these two different sanding sponges. I use 400 and 600 grit. From Tamiya. Now, I'm not just saying I use Tamiya products, that it's not the case. But these are the ones I have. They work perfectly fine. 400 is really getting off, like, if you have a lot of excess nub mark. But, I mean, I got these off pretty well, so all you do is you just lightly go over it. Lightly. Go over the spot that you just took the nub mark off of. And you will have a slight abrasion texture, which is perfectly fine. It might not be as desirable, like let's say if you're not going to be painting the kit. That's why some people only say you can only use like your razor blade, for instance. Some people use their razor blade and they take their knife and they just swipe it across the surface like this. And what that does is it doesn't create such a harsh abrasion on the piece, and it doesn't look like there is a nub mark there at all, especially if you don't want to paint the kit. But 9 times out of 10, it really just depends on preference. There's nothing wrong with using sanding sponges if you're just going to be not painting it, or even if you are painting it. It's really up to the preference of the person, to be honest. I honestly use both. It just depends on what I'm working with at the time. Like if I'm working with a flat area that the nub mark really didn't leave that much of a scuff on it, then I wouldn't worry about using the sanding sponge all that much. But you just try and get as close as you can to the end of that nub, and then you cut it off. And then I'll use just the hobby knife. Now, there's two ways. You can just scrape it across just like this, or I try and just barely shave off some of the excess nub mark. But the problem with this is that it can be kind of not dangerous to yourself, but like dangerous to like overcutting on the part. Because what will happen is if you go too deep into the part, you'll leave a huge gouge, and that does not look good at all. So I 9 times out of 10 just like shave away this way. I hold it at like a 45-degree angle, and I just run the knife across the part. This is especially really useful for just flat edges. 9 times out of 10, almost always, I'll use this if I'm using it on a rounded piece, because with the knife you can only go flat. This, what's nice is it curves around the part, and that can be kind of the bad thing if you're using this on flat things, like a flat surface. What you'll end up doing is you'll end up pushing too much of it, kind of like this. This is very exaggerated, but if you're doing this and you just want to have like a smooth flat edge, you'll end up rounding out these hard edges on the part, which is not good. But it's really, really simple. Either way works. There is no right or wrong. There's no better tool. It's just mainly situational and what you feel comfortable using. But you end up picking up over time your own little, what you like, what you dislike. Some people just strictly use the hobby knife, which is perfectly fine, and some people just strictly use sanding sponges or sanding there we go. Sanding sponges or sanding paper. Now, I rarely use sanding paper. I specifically use sanding paper for if I'm working on like really hard. It's my dog at the door. I'm sorry. She wants to come in. But I normally use sanding paper for, let's say if I have like almost like a really hard angle, like if I were to look in here, that would be, if I were to look inside the hobby, or the nippers, that sharp indentation right there, to get a sanding sponge in between that is literally impossible. And to get your hobby knife in there, it'd be hard and difficult to try and get like that nice edge. That's when I would use sanding paper. So, because you can fold it on both sides and you'll get a really nice pointy edge on it. So I rarely use those. Only on specific occasions. But yeah, that's about it to sanding down parts, and it's really, really simple. If you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments. But I'm just gonna continue building this kit, and we'll see what it looks like in the end. All right, talk to you later, guys. All right, so he is all done and built, and I'm surprised. You know, he had a few parts that would fall off quite easily, like the backpack, just kind of like, just falls off. kind of shocking for an Iron Blooded Orphan kit. I was expecting a lot more from this guy, but articulation, no, is amazing. It's just I'm surprised that I've had a lot of trouble with falling parts off of him. That's about it though. Yeah, but as you can see, just like using your hobby knife to either scrape away at the surface, or more conveniently are the sanding sponges. They work just as well. Either one, it honestly depends on preference. I use both, and I flip-flop between like what I feel like would be the better tool to use to sanding down the nubs, or just basically removing the nubs in general. Other than that, it really comes down to preference, and it takes a little bit to, as a builder, to figure out what you like more. Some people like the hobby knife, just using the hobby knife, completely fine. Some people strictly just use the sanding sponges. One thing I did forget to mention earlier, though, was that actually not normally, what you want to do is you want to start out with a coarser, not super coarse, but like a coarser, like this is 400 grit of sanding paper. And what you want to do is you want to move your way up. I only use 2. Some people use like 3, 4, 5 different grades. I think that's a little much. They'll get a really nice finish on it, like, so there won't be any, grooves left over after doing that many steps of sanding. It is very time consuming though, which I can't be bothered. I'm sorry. I can't be bothered to do that. But so that's why if there's grooves that I want to get rid of on the surface, I'll scrape it away with my hobby knife. But I'll sometimes originally would, just sand it down just to get that nice smooth surface, because what can happen with the hobby knife is if there's a slight raise from the nub still being there, you'll get a like crevice when the hobby knife goes over it, and that stinks when that happens, and it's not fun to deal with. So another thing you can do is you can go over and sand it, either coarse or medium, or I don't really use fine. Fine is for polishing and stuff, and there's super high grits that are strictly just for polishing. Most of those that you have to use like a wet sand, use water and use the sandpaper with it to get a really nice like polish on it. That's cool. I haven't taken the time to do any of that though, because it's just a process of that. In that case, you would have to use like 5 stages of sandpaper and work your way up little by little. But anyways, yeah. That's just the basics to sanding or nub removal, and it's really easy. It's just pretty much based on preference on what you want to use. I highly suggest using both, just to see what you like more. You'll probably end up falling to one side, or like me, I don't care. I end up using both. Half the time, I lean more towards the sanding sponges, and occasionally using my hobby knife. But if it's like, it all depends for me, what kind of a mood I'm in. But yeah, this guy is all nice and built now. Happy with him. And since we're going to be painting him, I know some people swear by this. I have found that it works out really well, personally. Before we paint him and prime him, I'm going to wash him off with soap and water. I'll go ahead and show you how to safely take apart parts, because there's a few different ways that you can take apart parts, and it's some of the easiest ways to damage parts is when you snap everything together, and then trying to take those parts off, and then you damage the edges of the the line, like a panel line like these. It's just that's really heartbreaking. When I was first doing it and taking my Gundams apart to go paint them, because I had no idea. I'm just like, oh yeah, just stick a hobby knife in there and just rip them out, right? No, no, unfortunately, it's not that easy. But yeah, what we'll do next time, we'll talk about how to safely, or at least as safe as possible, to remove nub marks. See, I got this handy dandy thing, and I'm not. The only way that I got this was this specific one was buying a mega size kit. They come with two, and I'm not saying you have to go buy a mega size kit to get a freaking part separator. Like, that's ridiculous. Essentially, that'd be like $100+ for a silly part separator that is just made out of plastic, you know. So a lot of people just use their hobby knife and be really careful with it. But this thing, oh my god, if you do have a mega size kit, save this. This will save your life if you plan on painting a lot. But we'll get to that in the next video, and I hope you liked it, and see you guys next time. Bye-bye! What you doing? Huh? You're so cute. What you doing? What are you doing?